In 1984, death row is home to the two most notorious inmates in Virginia, brothers Linwood and James Briley.
They were absolutely vicious. They had absolutely no conscience, no respect for human life whatsoever.
The guards are now captives, and 6 of Virginia's most notorious killers are free.
6 inmates broke out at about 10:30 last night.
Dangerous killers on the loose.
If they murdered once, they were capable of murdering again.
A nationwide manhunt.
The trail is getting cold. They could be anywhere by now.
This is the shocking saga of siblings whose reign of terror in Richmond was marked by unspeakable acts of murder and violation.
The level of violence was horrifying.
Men, women, and children would lose their lives, seemingly at random.
Yet, in a twist that defied belief, their story took an even darker turn when they achieved the impossible: an escape from the clutches of death row, leaving the city in fear and disbelief.
You could all but chart it like a fog bank as the fear rolled across the 4 counties from Warrenton outward. And as the sightings increased, people became more frightened. The fact that there were in their midst 6 people that had killed 17 folks, had murdered them, including a 5-year-old child. And among their rapes was a 76-year-old woman. They began to arm themselves.
Imagine this: 57-year-old woman is shot in her backyard on January 28, 1971, as she is hanging laundry. Her family thinks that she might have had a heart attack, only to realize a small bullet hole in the robe she was wearing after the funeral home returned it. Believe it or not, that's how Linwood Earl Briley began his murderous career at age 16. He would later admit that he had shot Christian deliberately, adding, "I heard she had heart problems. She would have died soon anyway." But let's take a short pause and go back in time to dig deeper into the origin and upbringing of the killer boys. The Briley family consisted of 3 brothers. Linwood Earl, born on March 26, 1954. James Dirrell Jr., born on June 6, 1956, and Anthony Ray, born on February 17, 1958. They were raised by their parents, James Dirrell Briley Sr. and Bertha, in the Highland Park neighborhood of Richmond. Their oldest brother, Edward Jerome, a.k.a. Boot, was born on July 7, 1952. He left home in his early teens to live with relatives in North Carolina and did not partake in the criminal activities of his younger siblings. The boys' father, James Dirrell Briley Sr., whom they reportedly respected more than anyone else, did not trust them as much, and he had always locked his bedroom since the boys started changing their behaviors. With the behavior changing, were the boys still sweet and helpful to their neighbors like before? Let's see in the next chapter. Fast forward to where we had paused. Let's get into the details of how the brothers entered their murderous careers. The Briley brothers' descent into criminality began on January 28, 1971, when Linwood, at the age of 16, committed his first murder. While home alone, he used a rifle to shoot Orline Christian, a 57-year-old neighbor, fatally as she was hanging laundry outside.
He claimed that he was shooting at a bird.
The crime initially went unnoticed, as it was assumed that Christian had suffered a heart attack.
At first, it was more or less a natural death because she had heart problems, until some of the family noticed a spot on her.
However, during the viewing, her relatives noticed a small bloody mark under her armpit and requested a second examination by the funeral director. This led to the discovery of a small caliber bullet wound under her armpit, revealing the true cause of her death. Following this discovery, an investigation was initiated, and a detective recreated the scene in Christian's backyard using a plywood sheet with a hole representing the wound. This reenactment pointed to the Briley residence as the source of the fatal shot.
And he turned this 2x4 around until he eventually, it showed that it would possibly have come from Linwood Briley's rooftop.
Inside the home, the murder weapon was discovered, and Linwood confessed to the crime, saying, "I heard she had heart problems. She would have died soon anyway."
His response, according to the documents, was, well, she was going to die anyway.
His defense attorney argued that the shooting was accidental, leading to Linwood being sentenced to a year in reform school for the killing. Following in his brother's footsteps, J.B. also found himself in legal trouble at a similar age, receiving a sentence to juvenile hall for shooting at a police officer during a chase.
I did a wrong, which was in '73. I armed robbed a store. I shot at a police officer. I made a mistake and I went to prison.
As if setting off a chain of dominoes, the Briley brothers' criminal behavior quickly spiraled out of control. There was no slowing down. They moved swiftly from one offense to the next. In 1979, the Briley brothers, joined by an accomplice named Duncan Eric Meekins, initiated a terrifying 7-month spree of random killings that left the city and its surrounding areas in fear. The first attack took place on March 12, 1979, when Linwood approached the Henrico County home of William and Virginia Butcher. Pretending to have car trouble, he asked to use their phone, then forced his way inside at gunpoint, signaling for Anthony to follow.
Pull it open, pull a gun on me, get your ass back in there.
The brothers tied up the couple, looted the house, and soaked each room in kerosene. As they fled, they ignited the fuel, leaving the house in flames. They made off with stolen items, including a television, a CB radio, a .32 pistol, and jewelry. Miraculously, William Bucher was able to untie himself and his wife from their loosely bound restraints, escaping just as the fire took over their home. Surprisingly, they were the sole survivors of the Brileys' murderous spree. On March 21st, the Brileys struck again, attacking Michael W. McDuffie, a vending machine serviceman in his suburban home. They assaulted him, shot him, and robbed him. Just 10 days later, on March 31st, Linwood killed 28-year-old Edric Alvin Clark over a drug dispute that involved their accomplice, Meekins. On April 9th, the brothers tracked 76-year-old Mary Gowan from her babysitting job to her home. Once inside, they brutally beat and robbed her before shooting her and fleeing with her valuables. The violence continued on July 4th when the gang encountered 17-year-old Christopher Phillips near Linwood's parked car. Suspecting him of trying to steal the vehicle, they dragged him to a nearby backyard. As Phillips cried out for help, Linwood ended his life by dropping a cinder block onto his head. The Briley brothers' relentless spree continued. On September 14th, disc jockey John Harvey Johnny G. Gallagher took a break outside a South Richmond nightclub when he crossed paths with the Baileys. The brothers, who'd been searching for a victim all night, decided to ambush whoever came outside. Gallagher was attacked by Linwood and forced into the trunk of his own Lincoln Continental. He was then driven to the abandoned ruins of a paper mill on Mayo Island, situated in the James River. There, he was removed from the trunk and executed with a point-blank shot to the head. The brothers took $6 from his wallet, dividing it among themselves. Gallagher's body was thrown into the river. His remains were found 2 days later. When Linwood was eventually arrested, He was still wearing a ring, taken from Gallagher's hand. On September 30th, the Brileys targeted 62-year-old private nurse Mary Wilfong. After following her home to her Richmond apartment, they ambushed her just outside her door. Linwood brutally beat her to death with a baseball bat, and then the brothers entered her apartment to steal valuables. 5 days later, on October 5th, the violence continued just 2 blocks from the Briley home on 4th Avenue. There, 75-year-old Blanche Page and her 59-year-old boarder, Charles Garner, became their next victims. Page was bludgeoned to death, while Garner was subjected to a fatal assault and stabbed with a variety of weapons, including a baseball bat, 5 knives, a pair of scissors, and a fork. The scissors and fork were left protruding from Garner's back.
They put butcher knives all the way down through the floor.
The final victims of the Briley brothers' murderous spree were the family of Harvey Wilkerson, a longtime friend of the brothers. On the morning of October 19th, despite promising a judge that he would stay out of trouble while on parole, JB led his brothers on a hunt for another victim that night. When Wilkerson saw the brothers approaching his home, where he lived with his 23-year-old common-law wife, Judy Diane Barton, who was 8 months pregnant, and her 5-year-old son, Harvey Wayne Barton, he instinctively locked his door. However, noticing this, the brothers approached the front door, and Wilkerson, fearing their reaction if he refused them entry, let them in. Once inside, the brothers overpowered both adults, bound and gagged them with duct tape. Linwood then assaulted Judy Barton in the kitchen, raping her within earshot of the others. Meekins continued the assault, after which Linwood dragged Barton back to the living room, searched briefly for valuables, and left the house. The remaining gang members covered their victims with sheets. JB instructed Meekins, "You've got to get one," leading Meekins to shoot Wilkerson in the head with a pistol. JB then fatally shot both Judy Barton and her son Harvey. Police officers coincidentally patrolled the neighborhood when they noticed the gang members sprinting down the street at high speed. Unaware of where the shots had been fired, they did not immediately connect the group to the crime. The bodies of the victims were not discovered until 3 days later, but the Briley brothers were all arrested shortly thereafter. Finally, the killing spree has come to an end, and they can face justice. During police interrogation, Duncan Eric Meekins was offered a plea agreement in exchange for providing state's evidence against the Briley brothers. He accepted the deal and gave a detailed account of their crime spree. As a result, he avoided the death penalty and was incarcerated under an alias in an out-of-state prison, far from the Briley brothers. Under the terms of the agreement, Meekins received a life sentence plus 80 years, making him eligible for parole after serving 12 to 15 years at the time of his conviction. But what about the brothers? Anthony Briley, the youngest of the trio, received a single life sentence with the possibility of parole due to his limited involvement in the killings. Following Virginia's Triggerman statute, both JB and Linwood were given multiple life sentences for the murders committed during the spree. However, they faced capital charges only in cases where they had personally carried out the killings. Linwood was sentenced to death for the abduction and murder of John Harvey, Johnny G. Gallagher, while JB received 2 death sentences for the murders of Judy Barton and her son Harvey. Both were sent to death row at Mecklenburg Correctional Center near Boynton in early 1980. Once the brothers were transferred to Mecklenburg Correctional Center, they quickly became the ringleaders in a 6-inmate escape plan. In the initial stages of the escape, which involved a coordinated takeover of the death row unit, both Brileys expressed a desire to kill the captured guards by dousing them with rubbing alcohol and setting them on fire. However, their plans were thwarted by fellow death row inmates. Willie Lloyd Turner, who was convicted of murder and later executed by lethal injection on May 25, 1995, blocked James from carrying out his plan. Wilbert Lee Evans, who was on death row for the murder of Alexandria City Sheriff's Deputy William Truesdale, prevented Linwood from raping a female nurse. Despite Evans's actions during the escape, he was executed on October 17, 1990, despite pleas for clemency and statements from Mecklenburg guards who said they owed their lives to him. Alexandria Commonwealth's attorney, John Clough, opposed clemency, and Democratic Governor L. Douglas Wilder, the state's first African-American governor, ultimately denied it. The group's initial plan after escaping was to flee to Canada. Two of the inmates, Lem Davis Tuggle Jr. and Willie Leroy Jones, almost succeeded, making it as far as Vermont before being apprehended at gunpoint by police. They were held at Marble Valley Correctional Facility in Rutland, Vermont, pending their extradition back to Virginia. Meanwhile, the Brileys and their remaining co-escapers split off at Philadelphia. The Brileys went to live near their uncle, Johnny Lee Council, in the north of the city. Their time on the run came to an end on June 19th, when they were captured by a heavily armed group of FBI agents and police. The authorities had determined their location by placing wiretaps on their uncle's phone line. The remaining appeals for both Briley brothers were quickly exhausted. In the weeks leading up to his execution, James Briley married Evangeline Grant Redding, a writer who believed in his claims of innocence, in a prison ceremony on March 28, 1985. The ceremony was attended by his father, James Sr. The brothers were executed in the electric chair at the Virginia State Penitentiary in Richmond, Linwood, on October 12, 1984, and J.B. on April 18, 1985. For his last meal, Linwood had grilled tenderloin steak, a baked potato, green peas, a salad with French dressing, rolls with butter, cake, peaches, punch, and milk. His last words were, "I am innocent." J.B.'s last meal included fried shrimp with cocktail sauce and a lemon-lime-flavored soft drink. In his final moments, he smiled at the witnesses and twice asked them, "Are you happy?" Before J.B. was executed, Shirley Barton Hayes, the mother of Judy Barton, made a heartfelt plea for him to admit his guilt. Although she did not believe in capital punishment, she asked him to confess so his soul would be right with God. On the day of J.B.'s execution, fellow inmates attempted to delay the process by attacking the guards with homemade knives. The resulting altercation injured 9 guards and 1 inmate. Linwood left behind a son, Norman Luckwan Ampey, who later served time in prison for bank robbery and passed away in 2015. Anthony Ray Briley was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, including 3 for the Barton family killings. He was sentenced to life in prison, plus 119 years, with the possibility of parole. Anthony avoided capital murder charges because it couldn't be proven that he personally carried out any of the murders. He is serving his sentence at Augusta Correctional Center, located about 20 miles from Staunton, Virginia. All of his parole applications have been rejected by the State Parole Board, as have those of Duncan Meekins. This is despite recommendations from former prosecutors Robert J. Rice and Warren von Schuch, who have highlighted Meekins' cooperation in the prosecution and conviction of the Briley brothers. Were they born to kill? Let us know what you think in the comments section. Remember to catch another video from our channel about Richard Russell, a man who stole a plane only to crash it. See you in the next one.